This week's episode is brought to you by Sif and Ronan Tucker. Thank you, Sif and Ronan Tucker. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that keeps the Whole Rabbit delivering crunchy brain snacks directly into the mouth of our genetically modified meat antenna, which has been surgically attached to the epidermis of a Danish pastry chef we purchased on a website on the dark web. If you'd like to support the Danish or just hear the second half of this episode, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your tiny monthly donation of just $5 will get you not just access to the second half of this show, but our extended episodes, more than doubling the binge-worthy content you enjoy. But that's not all. I'll even send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our Big Bunny cover art and the secret keys to our Discord server, where we share dragon curry recipes made from actual dragons. We also have tiers for monthly tarot readings, a 4x4 military spec patch, show notes, a set of handmade wooden runes for divination, and even one tier that allows you to pick a show topic of your choice. If that sounds like too much spaghetti for your meatballs, consider giving us a friendly review, like, share, or subscribe, because that helps us grow tremendously, and you will be blessed with supernaturally good bunny luck. In this week's episode, we discuss holy relics, specifically weapons used to symbolize imperial power. In the free show, we focus our attention on the fabled Spear of Destiny, focusing on the pre-Christian symbolism, which was borrowed to embellish the legend of the spear and its corollaries in other cultures and the occult. Near the end, we discuss the Swastika and Etruscan Fasces. In the extended show, we shift our focus to the Ark of the Covenant and the Imperial Treasures of Japan, which have been kept secret from the public for over 2,000 years. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the show.
God probably has a wicked-ass microphone.
It's called the Church. God speaks through the Pope, who is his representative on Earth. And he has cookies.
And lube, apparently.
That's gross. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just suspend our disbelief concerning the use of dubiously sourced weapons to coerce the masses into obedient submission under the firm grip of the Imperial Eagle's sharp talons. Nay, we explain in embarrassingly high detail the deeply embedded psycho-mythological currents of mimetic overlap which empowers these silly artifacts, and why they are effective tools against the minds of people, because this week we're discussing holy relics, weapons of imperial power. I'm your host, Hack Rabbit, otherwise known as Luke Madrid. I'm joined by co-hosts, the Hellenistic Hound of Heroism, Maurice.
Aroo, I have returned.
Malachor 5, the recalcitrant robber of reliquaries.
With a golden shovel in hand.
And the fiery red flesh of Hecaastra.
Hello. It's just a niacin flush.
That's what they all say.
I'm still itchy.
Even though this episode sounds like it's about Star Wars, it's not, but that doesn't mean a lot of the stuff we're going to be discussing today isn't exactly like Star Wars, because it is.
It's true.
Gosh,
Mari's not down.
you know me. Not really the Star Wars type, but everything is about Star Wars, apparently.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, for starters, the Church has a history of relics being made of actual stuff, like how the Sith collect in Star Wars, and then the Saints or Jedis, they evaporate into nothing when they die, or at least their bodies don't decay, is the idea.
Don't they just ascend?
Same thing.
It's something like that. And it's not all of them either. It's like only master level people who are at peace with the Force and their death. Kind of like Buddha.
Luke showed me this video called The Path of a Lightsaber, and it really clarifies how Luke's lightsaber is a relic.
It's cursed. It has the blood of innocence on it. And we see the same motif throughout the Church with different items called relics.
Right. This prompted me to just look at the etymological origins of relic and it's from at least 1200. Relic, with the K, quote, a body part or other object held in reverence or affection due to its connection with a holy person. From Old French, relique, the late Latin
Reliquii.
the remains of a martyr. Relic is tied to holy people or somebody who's died. It's not just an artifact. It's like a special artifact that has some story behind it about some sort of martyr or prophet, or, you know, the list goes on a holy person.
Due to its sympathetic connection or as actually being a body part.
Yeah, like an item that they maybe used or touched frequently also would classify as remains.
I mean, even the ashes of someone, you know, that you keep in an urn, technically, of that person. So why would you want to keep a relic?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Some cultures even make exceptions to their own rules. In both Greek and Christian belief systems, the object or body part being memorialized does not emit some kind of magic power necessarily, but serves as an embodiment, a reminder of a particular hero, saint, or god with valuable wisdom or a code of ethics sacred to its keepers. Yet still, other items are said to have numerous miracles attributed to them, while others not so much. In cases like the fabled Spear of Destiny, it seems to coincide with events and people of legendary importance for reasons beyond human understanding or control. Which brings us to the Spear of Destiny, the expansion pack to the first-person shooter I ever played. Thank you, John Carmack. This is where you should grab some popcorn.
Like how Alex DeLarge imagines himself as a Roman general of some sort, just at the whip behind Jesus as he's going down the boulevard.
Because that's where we are. Our story begins Friday in 33 AD, just outside Jerusalem at Golgotha, where 3 condemned criminals are struggling desperately in the blistering sun to hold their own body weight as it slowly suffocates them upon the cross. This is a particularly inglorious and agonizing end for a man whose small but incredibly pious group of rebels proclaimed to be the Jewish Messiah. For these early followers of Christ, this is an unthinkably tragic and even humiliating end. This is because, for Messianic Judaism, the Messiah is more than just a healer or even a wise prophet. He's a uniter and redeemer of the Jewish people, who is meant to defeat Israel's enemies at the tip of a spear, not be on the receiving end of one. This makes the inscription placed above Christ during his crucifixion a particularly scathing mockery.
John 19:19. And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews.
According to the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, at 3 p.m., the 9th hour of the day, Christ, quoting Psalms 22, says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani? My God, why hast thou forsaken me?
That's rough, buddy.
You have to read all 4 of those Gospels to get all of his sayings, but that's the one that appears twice, both in Matthew and Mark. Now, because the canonical Gospels are being written in the wake of a failed Jewish revolt, which had resulted in the soul-crushing destruction of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, the early Christians, Messianic Jews themselves, are doing their best to blame the Orthodox Hebrew community for all the catastrophic disasters they are currently living through. To better emphasize this, the Roman governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, is portrayed as somewhat indifferent and decides to place the fate of Christ in the hands of the Jewish multitudes, who are crowding Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Why is this important? It shows the political bias implicit within the mythology of the crucifixion, which infuses the relics created from it with their own political charge, which, as we will see, make them the perfect tool for the expression of state propaganda.
Isn't it the same kind of mockery to put the crown of thorns on him as well?
Right.
As if that was a relic, but it's really a torture device.
And through his martyrdom, it becomes a relic, should anybody actually have that crown of thorns. I'd also like to just say now that this motif of propaganda, I might be coming back to that. Like, see, this is religious propaganda. I might be saying that a few times this episode.
Well, as we researched, they seemed inextricably linked.
In my opinion, that's pretty much what this episode's about.
Some experts speculate that if Pontius Pilate truly put Christ's fate in the hands of the Jewish crowds, they likely would have just called for him to be stoned or simply put to death in some other way. The operative idea being that the punishment of crucifixion was probably a Roman idea. It was well known that Pilate was not a man to allow rabble-rousing or shenanigans. In fact, his career in the region was abruptly ended for slaughtering a crowd of armed Samaritans who, relevant to today's discussion, were actually out hunting for artifacts and relics Moses believed to have buried in Tirithana near Mount Gerizim. But Pilate never suffered any consequences from it because Emperor Tiberius died before Pontius could stand trial, and Caligula really just didn't care. While it might seem like a subtle point, by blaming the crucifixion on Jewish multitudes, it frames the Romans as the rightful instruments of God's prophecy and helps establish the idea of righteous power of a holy relic with a violent political legacy. In furtherance of this idea, the Romans were also beholden to Jewish custom concerning the duration the crucifixion was allowed to go on. It was, after all, occurring during Passover and prior to the Sabbath, which would begin at sundown. As it says in Deuteronomy 21:22 through 23.
And if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, and he be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but thou shalt in any wise bury him that day. For he that is hanged is accursed of God, that thy land may not be defiled, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. You can't just leave that shit out overnight, it's gonna get rancid.
Yeah. So in order to stay in accordance with Hebrew custom, Christ needed to die and be disposed of entirely by 6 p.m. when the sun went down, necessitating a brutal crucifragium be performed upon the condemned. Crucifragium was a rarity amongst those condemned by the Romans, which had inherited crucifixion from the conquest of Alexander, who had picked it up from the Persians. For the Romans, part of the appeal was letting the condemned die slowly over the course of days and days. Hanging from raised arms would make it impossible to take a breath without pushing upon a small wooden platform above which the feet were nailed. Crucifragium was meant to hasten the death and prevent the condemned from holding themselves up to breathe by forcefully shattering the shin bones. Thus, to stay in accordance with biblical law and in accordance with the Sabbath, the crowds began to petition Pilate to start breaking some shins.
John 19:33. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they brake not his legs.
According to John, this was a prophecy foretold. According to the standards God set for Passover in Exodus 12, the sacrificial lamb is not to have any bones broken. The lack of broken bones is also prophesied in Numbers 9:12, as it says in Psalms 34:19-20.
The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects his bones, not one of them will be broken.
Observing that Christ was already dead, a Roman centurion named Longinus, named in the apocryphal Gospels of Nicodemus, used his spear to pierce the chest of Christ near the ribs. According to the Gospels, both water and blood flowed from the wound and into the eye of Longinus, healing it of its various maladies, and instantly restoring his damaged sight. According to Zechariah 12, this too was of Old Testament prophecy.
And I will pour upon the house of David, and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and of supplications. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him, as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him, as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn.
Well, Zechariah was written as far back as the 6th century BCE. Both it and the New Testament are borrowing religious imagery from older, well-known myths which are relevant to the story of Christ, and the lance which pierces his side. As discussed in our Lucifer episode, there are numerous instances in which Jesus Christ is related symbolically to the planet Venus, which the Romans referred to as Lucifer. Christ even refers to himself as the morning star, an epithet of Venus in Revelations 22:16.
I, Jesus, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star.
In Greek mythology, Venus was personified as Eosphoros, which means light bearer, and was the child of Eos, goddess of the dawn. Now, Eosphoros has a few brothers, one of which is named Memnon, who was slain defending Troy during a challenge with Achilles, who ran a spear through his side. Memnon is often depicted slain from his spear wound in his side, cradled by his mother, Eos, who is crying to the heavens for mercy. In response, Zeus turns Memnon immortal, just like Jesus. This would become a favorite scene to depict in Christian art, except with Mary and Christ. Michelangelo's Pieta is a well-known example. In the Gospels, the wound in Christ's side issues forth blood and water. The church says the blood is symbolic of redemption of sin, while the water represents new life or rebirth. While one source suggested that the water is due to a pleural effusion from hypervolemic shock, the Greek myths offer us yet another perspective why Christ's side would emit both blood and water. After all, Memnon was not the only myth that Christ borrowed from. In Greek culture, there was Prometheus, creator and, most importantly, champion of mankind who suffered torture at the hands of Zeus for having given the gift of fire to humanity. Because fire is analogous to vision and Prometheus' name means foresight, these symbols are represented by Longinus, whose eyesight is healed by the blood and the water of Christ's wound, and, in line with the story, has enough clarity or vision or foresight to become one of Christianity's first converts. This is further evidence when we consider that Prometheus' father was Iapetus, a name which literally means wounded or pierced with a spear, and is said to be responsible for Prometheus creating humanity as mortals, which Christ, as a mortal human and God incarnate, allows for the blood sacrifice to redeem the sins of humanity. While the blood might be a reference to Prometheus' father Iapetus, it would follow that the water might symbolize his mother, Clymene. Clymene is an ocean nymph, and her name means famous. In her capacity to grant fame, she's often depicted alongside Hera during the Judgment of Paris, and is symbolic of Hera's ability to offer ownership of Europe and Asia, the exact reason future rulers would seek out the Holy Lance of Longinus, or as we know it, the Spear of Destiny.
And that's also not to invoke any of the Egyptian myths that they borrow Jesus' story from either. And Mithras, and the list goes on.
Well, we were thinking of storm deities that would have a spear in ancient Egypt, and really, Set is the first one that comes to mind. If that were not enough, an analogous myth exists in Norse culture. In order to gain access to unrevealed wisdom and attain enlightenment, the Norse father god Odin threw his right eye into the well of Murmur, sacrificed himself upon his mythic spear Gungnir, and hung himself from the world tree Yggdrasil. Here, we see all the elements of the crucifixion in full effect. Sacrifice upon a tree, pierced by a spear, the wounded eye commingled with the enlightening water, and the divine right to kingship. It's all present. Even Christ, crying out at the 9th hour, is reminiscent of Odin hanging on the tree for 9 days and nights. It would be this same spear, Gungnir, which accompanies Odin during his final fight with Fenrir during the Ragnarok.
There's also symbolism of Jesus found in Baldur, who is one of Odin's sons. He's immortal, but then he gets shot with a mistletoe arrow and loses his immortality and dies, and then thus that's the beginning, first sign of Ragnarok happening.
Oh. And then we use mistletoe at Christmas.
Yes.
Do you think if Longinus had used an arrow, the blood would have spurted all the way to his eye, like to complete the prophecy?
This is what they should be doing on the History Channel, seeing how much blood can come out the ribs.
Mythbusters.
Only a flesh wound.
This even comes up in the tarot. If you believe Nuit in the Book of the Law about changing tarot attributions, we see the symbolism of fish, water, spear, piercing, blood, and kingship present between the moon and emperor cards of the tarot, between which is the demarcation for the zodiacal new year. Here, the mythic symbolism is broken down to its most basic form. The king is the one who spears the fish. With Christ, the association with Pisces is there, or the fish, and then the spear, or Aries, and the emperor, or the king, and so it's built even into the tarot.
And before we move too far from Jesus on the cross and INRI, there is a whole Rosicrucian interpretation of what INRI means and the cross. So it's like elements and the black cross of Saturn put together with a divine martyr upon it. There's a lot going on there. It's propaganda, baby.
I got some pretty awesome pictures of some Christian iconography at the Louvre, and there is definitely like some blood spurting going on out of the crucified Jesus. It's pretty neat.
Now, according to legend, Longinus kept the spear his entire life, but was himself martyred for converting to Christianity. From strictly historical perspectives, there's frankly no evidence for the existence of Longinus or even the Spear of Destiny. What does exist, however, is a number of historical rulers laying claim to possessing the lance of Longinus as proof of their right to kingship and a good luck trinket which assures victory in war.
So I think this might be the first time in this episode that we're starting to converge from like myth and gods actually existing on Earth and their item to converting to some real people claiming to be in possession of said items. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that even if the item itself isn't real according to its own terms, it still has power.
Right. For example, I don't even think Jesus was an actual person. So this spear that stabs this nobody, it can't exist either, but they do exist to me in a magical formula way, and it does have power, does have symbolism that can be used.
And the people who do believe in the historical truth of Christ, so to speak, they can't attest for Longinus.
I mean, there's really no historical truth of Christ. I don't want to get into it, but the only evidence is found in the Bible. There's no other, like, physical evidence of his existence.
There's somebody screaming at their stereo right now. Yes, there is!
Still an important lesson. I'm not saying you're wrong in praying to this name or whatever. It's just not important.
There could be evidence.
But there's not.
There could be, though.
So for the believers of spear lore, it all begins when the Jews sacked the Roman armory in Jerusalem in 66 AD during a revolt. This is supposedly when the lance of Longinus was cloistered away for safekeeping by the faithful. Now, some people say it doesn't show up again until Emperor Constantine, but some people say it fell into the hands of Saint Maurice. Who's Saint Maurice? According to legend, the Holy Lance resurfaces 200 years later and in the possession of a black Theban soldier named Mauritius. Mauritius was brought up in the ancient city of Thebes in Roman-controlled Egypt around 250 AD, joining the Roman army and working his way up the ranks until he commanded the entire Theban legion, which was probably around 1,000 men, while other sources say 6,666, all of which are said to have been converted to Christianity en masse during a time when the fledgling religion was still seen as a threat to the empire. Perhaps because of his rank, this is how Maurice became possessed of the Lance of Longinus in the first place. Maybe he had an interest in the administrative power to track it down, but some people just think that others later in history who claimed the Spear of Longinus were really just carrying around the Spear of St. Maurice, but it's worth telling his story anyway. I think it's an interesting idea that an Egyptian from Thebes would be considered the first owner of the lance after Longinus. Like, was he meant to rule the world?
It's also interesting how the troops became converted to the cult of Christianity after he had the lance in his possession, which we'll see later on. It just continues to have more of a, I guess, martial influence upon people. Like, people use it as a good luck weapon when they're doing battle or something. So
Yeah.
that's a lot of the way that Christianity spread in the early times.
Like it's their right to go out and beat the shit out of you with this weapon.
Manifest destiny, biz.
It's the same idea.
The events the Theban Legion are famous for come when Emperor Maximian ordered the Legion to Gaul to help put down a revolt of the Bugatti, a word which means fighter in Gaulish, and were composed of mostly peasant farmers. Dispatched with orders to clear the Great St. Bernard Pass across the Alps, Maurice, with the Holy Lance in hand, would refuse direct orders from Maximian to harass and otherwise attack unarmed civilians, claiming that for Christian soldiers, this was simply inconceivable. While Maurice would claim his men's military allegiance was to Rome and the emperor, the spiritual duty would always be to God, and his men would not be attacking innocent civilians. In response, Maximian demanded the Theban legion to make sacrifices to the pagan gods and himself as emperor, but Maurice refused. In response, Emperor Maximian ordered the Theban legion be decimated, a practice in which every soldier in the legion draws lots so that every 10th man is executed by one of his fellow members of the legion, a truly severe and demoralizing punishment. Even after being decimated, the Theban legion continued to refuse to make sacrifices to the emperor or the pagan gods, and in response were piously decimated at least 2 more times before the entirety of the legion was ordered to be killed. The place in Switzerland where this occurred is known as Agaunum and is now St. Maurice, Switzerland, the site of the Abbey of St. Maurice.
Whoa, I just realized decimate. It means 10 in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So the etymology of the word literally defines it as 1 in 10 being killed.
Yeah,
So if you get hit for 10% of your HP, you got decimated.
that's right.
Another hand touches the lance.
Oh, myrrh.
You can't see it, but I'm raising my eyebrows.
Following the exceedingly tenuous and dubious history of the lance, it would appear again in the hands of none other than Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, who is said to be holding the lance at the Council of Nicaea. Kind of a big deal.
Boo!
Constantine supposedly found the lance during an excavation of Jerusalem, the largest archaeological operation of the ancient world. It was spurned by his mother Helena, who had been led there in dreams through the ancient city and shown where to find the relics.
That's cool.
It was there, in a temple of Venus, in the city of Jerusalem, where Helena saw in her intuition where to dig, and they uncovered a stone tomb beneath the temple, which she and all the other people present believed to be the tomb of Jesus Christ.
Beneath the Temple of Venus. Awesome.
And this is the site that would become the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It was during these excavations in the 4th century that Constantine would supposedly acquire the Lance of Longinus. He's also supposedly the one who had the nails from the crucifixion placed into the tip of the spear.
Boo, Constantine sucks.
Yeah, Doctor Doom in Marvel also made his armor with one of the nails from Christ's crucifixion so he can beat the shit out of Dracula.
Yeah, that's all they care about is winning the battle.
I just feel like there's a joke in here somewhere with Longinus and the spear tip.
Oh man, I've been wanting to make fun of that name for a minute.
Just the tip.
Exactly.
Man, if it weren't for Constantine, we'd all be pagan still.
The funny thing about Constantine and the Holy Roman Empire is that it wasn't holy, wasn't Roman, it wasn't actually an empire. Secret cults connected, worshiping underground temple gods.
It's a pyramid scheme.
Yeah, Constantine, there's evidence that he was a worshiper of Mithras, who is also Christ, but Mithras' story and Christ's story is similar to Osiris. And under one of the churches in Rome, very close to the Vatican, there is a temple to Osiris and Mithras underground where Roman officers would worship at this current time, if Constantine's time. So it's pretty amazing.
Sometime later, in 800 AD, Charlemagne, the first king of the Holy Roman Empire, was said to have been given the lance as a gift from Pope Leo III. Now, historians are quick to point out the spear's design is from the Carolingian dynasty in the 7th century, so it wasn't even the slightest bit old when Charlemagne acquired it, but at least the nail's consistent with a 1st century Roman nail if you ignore the age of the metal is not that old also. Nonetheless, this was the spear carried by Charlemagne, who won 47 consecutive battles with it. Never left it out of his sight, it even slept next to it. His soldiers were pretty stoked on it as well. They felt as long as he possessed the lance, they would never lose, and they didn't. But as the tale goes, Charlemagne would drop the lance while crossing the river, and he would die shortly after. It didn't help that it really demoralized the soldiers, and they thought it was a bad omen.
It was like his favorite toy that his mama gave him. He slept with it and all that stuff.
I need my comfort spear.
He was pretty fond of his personal weapons. According to medieval legend, Charlemagne's personal sword was a sword named Joyeuse, meaning joyous. And Joyeuse is the French ceremonial sword of coronation. It's been used since Philip III's coronation in 1270. Today you can find that sword displayed at the Louvre, and it still has a medieval blade at its core, despite having additions added over the centuries. But some legends say that the sword itself was forged to contain shards of Longinus's lance in the pommel. And it had also been crafted using the same materials as both the legendary sword known as Roland's Durandal and the coronation sword of England, which I'm going to talk about in the extended show.
Dang it, I could have seen it.
You didn't get to see the Joyeuse at the Louvre?
No, the Louvre is so big. I only got to see like a 10th of it. I did go through the Egyptian exhibit though.
I put a picture of it in the show notes.
Well, this is the beginning of taking pieces from what they believe to be legitimate nails and the lance, and then taking parts and putting it into other spears and other swords and being like, oh, well, see, this is also the sword of destiny, and this is the pommel of destiny, and
the butt plug of destiny is over here.
I would assume it's hard to prove whether or not they melted down some older item and then made it into other stuff. An early 20th century children's book describes the sword saying the following: one priceless thing Charlemagne ever carried in his belt, and that was Joyeuse, the sword, jewelless, which contained in a hilt of gold and gems the head of the lance that pierced our Saviour's side. And thereto he wore a pilgrim's pouch, against my faring to Jerusalem, or, if that may not be, to remind me that our life is but a pilgrim's way, and our joy but a pilgrim's rest, and our hope a palm.
I like that. That's humble for somebody who conquered all of Europe. I'm just on my pilgrimage to conquer all of Europe. Excuse me, I'm God. By the way, here's the spear. Die. Give me that. It's mine. Ha ha.
Most humble, most humble.
Just a pilgrim's rest.
According to Bullfinch's mythology, a book published in the late 1800s, Joyeuse is said to be the sword that Charlemagne used to both behead a Saracen commander named Corstubel and to knight Charlemagne's comrade, Ogier the Dane. And he comes up later too.
Those Danes sure talk funny. I can say that, right?
So who gets the lance next?
The lance was then passed down through a series of Holy Roman emperors, including Barbossa. Attila the Hun managed to plunder it from Rome when he sacked it, but he returned the spear a short while later, throwing it at the feet of a Roman officer, declaring, "Take back your lance! It is of no use to me, since I know not him that made it holy." Shortly after, Attila was finally defeated in combat. Once in the hands of Charles II, it came to rest in Nuremberg for 550 years, along with the Holy Imperial Regalia, but was moved to Vienna to avoid it falling into the hands of Napoleon, who wanted it very badly. It was then temporarily absconded back to Nuremberg by Hitler, and then finally Patton, who recovered it following World War II, returned it to Vienna, where it is now. Multiple sources would claim that Hitler died from self-inflicted gunshot wounds just hours after Patton acquired the lance.
That's crazy if that's true.
Now, speculation about the lance, specifically by Trevor Ravenscroft, basically invented the category of pseudo-history, so it's unlikely that we'll ever get any straight answers about the lance. But even though the quote you always read about Hitler wanting the lance for himself, it might not be true, he had a reason for wanting to acquire it, and it's because it had been a German national treasure for centuries, and it was his prerogative to get it back.
Yeah, and he also was interested in the occult, and he had what seems like, Nazi mages perhaps analyzing things in a magical scope, and things like this item would totally be on a list that he'd want to inspect should they have any supernatural power.
And nobody loved propaganda more than the Nazis. If they could get some, like...
Yeah, no shit. Forgot to mention that bit.
Now, the lance is still used in ritual today. A tiny ritual spear is used during the Divine Liturgy in the Byzantine Rite of the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Eastern Catholic Churches to cut a little piece of bread, or lamb, out of a big loaf of leavened bread called a phosphoron, which will then be consecrated to become the body of Christ. The spear is then used again to cut the lamb into little pieces for the communion.
They cut bread with a spear?
Yes.
Is it serrated?
No, it's like a little letter opener looking thing.
That seems terribly
tiny.
inconvenient.
It does. The whole time you're cutting the bread, you're supposed to be thinking about how terrible it was for Christ.
Oof.
In the Euchologion, which is a Christian book of spells, there's a prayer of the spear, which may be said by a priest to heal sick people.
That's cool. I never heard of this book.
Sounds like a handy spell to have.
Now, we know relics are supposed to have a healing effect on people because when Helen showed up in Jerusalem, she was digging through all the old crosses and she found 3 and she's like, well, which one's the one of Jesus? She tried them on a dead person, and the one that made the dead person come back to life, that was the actual crucifix of Christ. So, of course, that's science. So I wanted to wrap up the free show with a little discussion about these symbols which have become sacred to fascism. We discussed the swastika in some depth in our Sons and Serpents of Hollow Earth episode from about a year ago, but there's another mythic weapon of symbolic power sacred to fascists, specifically one for which the word is named, the fascists. While the Germans championed the swastika in World War II, the Italians championed the fasces, a traditional symbol which has its origins in ancient Etruscan civilization, which experienced its peak around 700 BC, near the foundational period of the Roman Republic, which inherited the symbol. The fascist, as a bundle of rods with an axe, was a grouping of all the equipment needed to inflict corporal or capital punishment. When used symbolically, it represents a Roman magistrate and their civil or military power known as imperium.
I didn't even know of this. I was completely unaware of this symbol.
It's still used in this context in the United States, as a fascist appears prominently behind the podium in the House of Representatives on either side of the American flag.
It's pretty wild. This whole, what Luke's about to get into, it's kind of mind-blowing. This whole imperial, like, weapon of you can't even touch it. Like, it's so powerful, like fascism almost. Like, it's very oppressive and you can't match it. It's like all over the world, and it's always with people who are in high status or quote-unquote the elite.
Interestingly enough, that is kind of where the fascist flag comes from. So when Mussolini took power in Italy, they used that very symbol to represent fascism in Italy.
But for some reason, it didn't become this, like, negative symbol we can never use again. Like I said, it's, you know...
It's a symbol of power and reverence of the leader, right?
Yeah.
I just find it fascinating that the swastika became unusable, but the fasces never got that same reputation.
Yeah, it is interesting because both symbols are appropriated from older references, but both of them were used to strike terror into people and kill millions. So it's really not a fair playing field, if you ask me.
So to be on brand with our podcast, what does Stanley Kubrick have to say about all this?
Well, if we consider The Shining and how Stanley Kubrick adapted it from a Stephen King novel, he substitutes the roque mallet for an axe, which is an apt symbol for the fascist because it's used as a punitive measure against his family as a burden of his imperium over the hotel. Like, the hotel has imperium over him, and he has imperium over his family. He must punish. He must show his... Go ahead.
It's just in this case, the empire of the spirits of the hotel, they want you to kill, so he's going to be the agent of that with an axe in hand.
Now, as we've discussed before, the swastika was a popular symbol in all cultures sharing the Proto-Indo-European language group, as symbolic of the weapon wielded by the king of the gods, usually a thunder god like Indra, Jupiter, Thor, Zeus, and, as we mentioned, maybe even Set and Marduk. Insomuch as the fascist is a practical weapon of state power, the swastika would become its spiritual equivalent. So, while we can obviously relate the swastika to Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, it was equally strong in association with the weapon of Vishnu, the Sudarshana chakra, or Wheel of Auspicious Vision. Considering how much time I've spent relating the Spear of Destiny to Prometheus, whose name means foresight, it seems a relevant association. But the Sudarshana chakra is related to the Spear of Destiny for a much more important reason. Well, in the West, European culture has been spreading the myth of whoever possesses the Spear of Destiny was meant to rule the world. The East had its own mythology concerning a man who would become the Chakravartin, or wheel-spinning king, who, likewise, was also meant to rule the world by possession of this mythic weapon. This was the dude Buddha was prophesied to become had he not taken this spiritual path of renunciation. Even still, Buddhism still uses this symbol as its legacy to enlightenment, or auspicious vision. These symbols persist into American culture through the Marvel franchise, which depicts both Mjolnir and Captain America's shield respectively as weapons only to be wielded by a righteous god-king figure to whom the world is worthy to be entrusted, etc., etc.
Well, I find it to be a sun symbol or a spinning wheel of the four elements or the four winds, the four directions. And then whoever wields it, greedy men can wield it to want to win battles or gain wealth. But a true person that would wield it, like say the Buddha would use it, is for the benefit of all in kind of a no ego state, right? Like in a higher state of mind, you could use it for good.
Now, if these relationships between the Wheel of Auspicious Vision and the Spear of Longinus to the state prefigures the relationship between Prometheus, or foresight, and the eagle of Zeus. Remember, Prometheus is chained to a rock with an eagle, symbolic of Zeus, enacting the corporal punishment of eating his liver, which was used in spells of divination and a form of mystic foresight or auspicious vision. Prometheus and the Sudarshana chakra are cognate in this sense, as both symbolize auspicious vision of the future. While Prometheus steals fire from heaven, the Sudarshana chakra, when it is personified as an anthropomorphic being, it's depicted as the destructive aspect of fire, which acts indifferently to good or evil. In short, the eagle is using Prometheus in the same way Caesar's eagle used Christ, and the same way Hitler used the swastika, as a weapon of destiny, rather than a tool of spiritual enlightenment, its original purpose.
And on the Tree of Life, and in tarot, in Hebrew, mysticism of Kabbalah, kind of symbolized in the chariot card and the Merkaba as being like a vessel to take you into like heaven or into the divine place to rule from, it seems.
Which is interesting because we know Proto-Indo-European culture spread through the use of the wheel. And in Buddhism, the term for suffering, dukkha, is a combination of words that mean bad axle hole. And if you stop and think about it for a minute, a chariot is really a combination of a big long spear and a wheel. So the idea of the chariot is the ultimate weapon, a combination of these two symbols. I mean, it might be built into our Proto-Indo-European language programming, you could say.
Yeah, there's a lot weaved into that whole discussion. This episode's kind of talking about some of the relics of that idea, I guess. And to invoke Star Wars for a little bit, the Sudarshana chakra is said to be 108 like bladed or spoked wheel. Yes. And I find it funny that the Empire in Star Wars has an 8-pointed star as their symbol. It's like a wheel star thingy. And I know it's not 108, but the 8 alone on it on the emblem, it's kind of like, well, is that the ultimate weapon? Is that why you have a Death Star?
Bro, what happens when you turn an 8 on its side?
It's like a 00 or an infinity symbol.
Infinity.
And I just think that the Empire's like most iconic symbol being the Death Star literally can blow up planets.
It's overpowered. OP.
It's overpowered, yeah. That's very like on brand with this whole idea that the Empire is an illusion or a metaphor for this holy lance or this swastika oppressive force in the galaxy.
And as we've mentioned, even Kojima named his series Metal Gear Solid. And the Metal Gear is this great weapon that is supposed to, whoever wields it, rule over the destinies of the Earth and mankind.
Metal Gear Rex. King. Super powerful wheel king. Wheel King.
I'm saying look into it. Thank you, everybody. If you'd like to hear the rest of the show where we talk about the Ark of the Covenant, Viking swords, and famous Japanese kami swords and shields and armor, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will get you access to not just this extended show, but all our extended shows. I'll send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art and the secret keys to our Discord server where you can talk to us about Darth Dingus's MR2. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, pew, pew.